Have you ever sat in that heavy silence at a family dinner? Here on Women's Life Stories, we retell those moments honest every day, sometimes controversial. Every story is a mirror. Subscribe, join the conversation, and maybe find a little healing. LILA leaned so close I felt the warmth of her breath. Gran, I heard Mom and Dad say they're sending you away today, and they're taking your money. Her voice was small but certain. I kept my smile steady for her and let the steadiness travel up my spine. She is 9, truthful to a fault, ink on her fingers from a leaky pen. She sat at the breakfast nook doing fractions while a pot of chicken soup ticked on low. Our cat Pepper attempted to hold down her workbook with both paws, as if he could keep the numbers from escaping. Martin would have teased that my bones could read the barometer. 18 months have passed since his funeral. In those first bruised weeks, my son Darren brought takeout and a script. "You shouldn't stay alone, Mom. Come stay with us." His wife Camille smiled like a hostess, trained kindness, no questions. I owned a small riverside cottage, 2 rooms, and a porch where geraniums survived every winter. I sold it. The sale brought in $560,000 more money than I had ever said out loud. Darren praised the timing. They were carrying a remodel overrun and a second mortgage that would not sit still. I told myself this was family being family. I wrote checks. We packed boxes into Darren's SUV and left the river behind. At first it felt like rescue. Lila's laughter threaded the evenings. Camille kept setting tea beside my hand. Darren moved my phone to their family plan to simplify everything and backed up my photos to their cloud. He made password changes with competent fingers. 2-factor codes began to arrive on his number. My church friends called. Somehow I always missed them. Later I learned Camille had told people I needed rest. The library book club kept meeting. The reminders stopped landing on my calendar. When I mentioned it, Darren's voice was gentle and heavy. "It's a lot, Mom. Maybe ease up for a while." His hand on mine felt like a lid. Money began leaving quietly. I covered groceries until Friday, then until next Friday. I paid the overdue insurance notice that flashed red on the counter. I picked up Lila from school when a meeting ran late, then on a schedule, then by default. I asked to see the credit card statements. Darren smiled. "I'll print them when the cycle closes." He never printed them. Some days usefulness steadied me the clean ache in my legs after carrying laundry, the harmony of plates put away. Other days it felt like a costume I had been buttoned into. I thought about a studio over the paint store on Maple Street, good light, a short walk to the Saturday market. Darren's tone turned urgent, loyal, and sharp. "Lila needs you. We need you. Why waste money on rent when we have space here?" Camille's sweetness finished the argument. "You're such a blessing, Nora. Blessings don't come with receipts, but patterns do." The spare key to my lockbox drifted from my purse to the kitchen drawer and then to somewhere I could not name. Passwords braided themselves into a cord only Darren could unknot. When I asked where last month's transfer went, Camille laughed that adult life was just bills and blur. Airy words floated over holes. This morning their cheerfulness rang an octave too bright. "Watch Lila for us," Camille called. The door clicked, the car slid away, the house settled as if listening for the next line. Pepper leapt to the windowsill and flicked his tail at the street. I washed my hands, dried them on the towel Martin used for Sunday cinnamon rolls, and checked the small ledger in my purse. Widow habit. I keep what matters close and portable identification. A ring of keys, a folded list of account numbers in my own handwriting. Carrying your life is a skill you learn without a teacher. "Shoes, little bird," I told Lila. "We're going to see an old friend." She pulled a face that meant boredom. "Will it be long?" "Only for people who count chickens before they hatch," I said. She didn't get it. That was fine. I needed the rhythm of my own voice. On the porch, I scrolled through my contacts to a number I had not used in years. Arthur Keene, the voicemail said, in the same measured baritone I remembered from high school debate. I hung up and tried again. "Nora," he answered, surprised into my name. "I need to see you today," I said. He did not ask why. "Are you safe?" "Yes," I said, and felt the words set like plaster. 2:30, he said. "My office." We put on our coats and stepped into the cool air. The river moved dull and certain under the clouds. Lila swung our joined hands like a metronome and asked if we could stop by the bakery with the red awning. "1 cinnamon knot," I bargained. She nodded solemnly as if we had signed something. Grief had thrown a film over everything. I had called it fog. Walking past the clipped hedges and the mulberry tree that stains the sidewalk in July. I saw edges again, the clean line where lawn met curb, the chalk sign outside the bakery that read, "Be kind to yourself today." I felt my breathing match its steadiness. Darren's tenderness had been true at first, and then recycled for a different purpose. Camille's tact had translated into a system for keeping me helpful and absent. It didn't need dramatic language. A map would do routes that bent away from my name on anything that mattered. Cul-de-sacs where my voice turned and reached no doorbell. At the crosswalk, a bus sighed and opened its doors. We waited for the light. Lila squeezed my fingers twice our code for I'm okay. I answered with one squeeze, me too. The air smelled like metal and bread. We bought the cinnamon knot and split it on the bench beneath the awning. I told Lila about an old silver trophy in the hall and how Arthur and I had argued our way into it before she was born. She listened, eyes bright. Is Mr. Keene nice? Yes, I said. He is careful. I checked the time. 2 hours until the appointment. I folded the empty paper bag and slipped it into my purse beside the documents that spell my name the way I will say it when asked. I tied my scarf and stood. Ready, I asked. Ready, she said. We stepped off the curb together. The lobby of Keene & Marlowe smelled faintly of lemon oil and paper. A brass clock clicked like a careful heartbeat. Lila found a basket of wooden animals near the window and arranged them into parades, while the receptionist slid coloring sheets across the desk. When Arthur opened the glass door with my name on his lips, the room brightened. Come in, he said. His hair had gone silver at the temples, but the intent way he listened had not changed. He glanced toward Lila. We'll leave the door open. His office was long and orderly. He pulled a legal pad close, uncapped a pen, and waited. I told him without embroidery. Martin's death, the cottage sold for $560,000. Moving in with Darren and Camille, the passwords that grew roots, the missed calls, the statements that never arrived. He asked short questions and wrote dates as if they were nails holding the story to the board. Do they have any formal authority over you, he said. My phone's on their plan. Nothing signed, I said, then stopped. There was a packet after the funeral. An emergency binder. I never signed the last page, I think. Arthur slid a form across the desk. Revocation of durable power of attorney, blank but heavy as a gavel. We'll remove even the possibility. You appoint no one today. Your signature witnessed and notarized. If anything exists, this supersedes it. A notary arrived with a stamp that left an embossed sun on the paper. My hand did not shake. When the page clicked into the folio, something inside me sat back down. Arthur moved to the next sheet. Your estate documents, you have a simple will from years ago. He held up a thin instrument with GRAN language. We'll update it so everything pours into a trust and is administered the way you decide. For Lila, I said. Lila, who was giving the camel a tiny paper hat. For Lila, he agreed. A trust that pays for health and education while she's a minor and limits discretionary distributions until she's older. 24. He drafted while I watched the river of ink lay down its course. He read sections in clean language, successor trustee at a local bank, rather than any relative dual signatures for transfers above a set amount, guardianship decided by a court and not implied by money. Last, he said, your accounts. Where are they? I took the ledger from my purse. First National checking savings and a certificate due in October. A small brokerage. Altogether a little over $600,000. Yes. We'll move everything today, he said. I'll call Mid-County Credit Union. I thought of the spare key that had wandered off of the two-factor codes that took wrong turns. I want the new accounts completely separate. No shared access. No online banking until I add it myself. That's the right sentence. By the time we were done, the revocation, the updated will, the Spring Orchard Trust. With Lila's name written the way she likes to write it, the stack had the weight of an answered letter. Lila presented her parade. They're going to the moon, she declared. Arthur tore a circle from a yellow legal sheet and taped it to the corner of the desk. Now you have one, he said. We walked 2 blocks to Mid-County, the afternoon paling. The credit union sat at Elm and 3rd. Behind the counter, a woman in a dark green jacket looked up. Mrs. Quinn, she said. Priya Nayar had been a teller when Martin and I opened our first account 30 years ago. In her office, I asked for transfers every dollar from First National's checking savings and certificate, every dividend sweep from the brokerage. Priya clicked through screens. Some of these are linked to phone authentication, she said. We can sever that and use in-person verification today. I'd like a safe deposit box, I said, and to change my contact number on every profile. Remove any secondary numbers. New debit card. No online until I come back with a new email I control. We'll issue temporary cards and print a new signature card, she said. When the balance is populated, she paused. We can stage the transfers as cashier's checks and deposit them here before end of day. She walked me through each confirmation number and seal. I tucked the receipts into the ledger and with Priya's help into the new box along with our marriage certificate and 3 photographs. On the sidewalk, a gust of wind tried to straighten the scarf at my throat. Lila trotted to keep step. Are we poor now? She asked. No, I said. We're organized. She liked that word. At the bakery, she asked whether we might bring home a loaf. One with a crust that cracks, she said. We chose a round country bread warm enough to fog the bag. At home, the rooms lay as we had left them, tidy, good-looking, a little staged. Pepper bounded down the hall, one ear inside out from sleep. I put the keys in a dish shaped like a leaf. LILA dragged a chair to the counter to help with the soup. She washed carrots as if polishing gemstones. The kitchen settled into the quiet of two people working. I skimmed the pot and tasted. Salt lived at the back of it, waiting. I added a pinch and watched steam rise. Yes. GRAN LILA said, "What does a trust do?" "It remembers what you wanted even when you're not in the room," I said. She nodded and returned to the carrots. I made tea and sat with the mug between my palms. On the table, LILA's homework bloomed in pencil and eraser shavings. I glanced at the clock and felt the exactness of time passing as it should. From the hall closet, I took down the good tablecloth, the one with ladder stitching that Martin admired because it looked like something you could climb. I ironed the corner that always wants to curl. The axe steadied me. In the living room, the light turned the color of brass. I opened a window an inch and let the air say what it had to say. LILA practiced her spelling in a whisper season measure, "Listen quiet." I set bowls on the counter to cool and sliced the bread. The crust let go with a soft knock. Butter waited square and patient. I put the kettle back on, not because we needed it, but because the small sound of water agreeing to boil pleased me. A brochure lay beneath the salt cellar, an assisted living community Camille had brought home. I flattened the curling corner with one finger and slid it under the napkins. It was simply paper. By the time the soup settled and the bread lay in a small hill, the house had the kind of order I used to think only mornings could have. LILA put away her pencils and set out spoons one by one, each handle lined with the edge of the placemat, as if she were laying track. Pepper leapt onto the chair across from mine and pretended he had been invited. Outside, the light thinned along the street. Inside, something that had been loose drew itself together. I checked the front latch, turned the knob once, and felt the click travel along the bones of the door, into the frame joinery, doing exactly what it was built to do. Headlights swept across the front room and drew a pale ladder on the ceiling. LILA looked up from the spoons she had lined precisely against the placemats. Pepper thumped to the floor and trotted to the hall like a butler late to the door. The latch felt cool under my hand. "Something smells amazing," Darren called as he and Camille came in with the same brightness people use to sidestep a hole. Camille set her tote on the bench and kissed the air near my cheek. "You shouldn't have fussed," she said, already sliding her phone into the charging nook. "It wasn't fuss," I said. "It was time." We sat. The soup let off a clean steam. The bread cracked like a quiet applause when I opened it. For a few bites, everything behaved: the table, the bowls, the way LILA reached for butter like she had been taught. I told Darren the crust came from the French bakery on 6th. He praised my adventurous streak as if I had taken up parachuting. Halfway through his second bowl, Darren cleared his throat and set the spoon down just so. "Mom," he said, "Camille and I have been talking about the next step." He pushed his napkin to the side as if it were a prop he had finished with. "There's a place in town, Willow Birch. They have activities, a garden medical staff on site. The brochure is on the counter." He didn't look at the counter. His gaze was trained on me like a camera finding its mark. Camille's smile softened into its careful version. "It's such a welcoming community," she said. "Friends your own age classes. We took a tour today." "We," I said lightly. The spoon was warm in my fingers. "Yes," Darren said. "We wanted to make sure it met our standards before we suggested it. It's just, you've taken on so much and we're stretched with work. This way there's support." LILA watched each of our faces in turn the way children do when they learn weather. Pepper jumped into the chair opposite mine and arranged himself with his back to Darren, which was not a statement but looked like one. "So soon," I said. "You toured today." "We were efficient," he said, pleased with the word. "Move-in can be quick if we sign the packet." I set my spoon down. The room did not tilt. It held. "Before you talk about packets, I said you should know I signed something this afternoon." Darren blinked. Camille's hands met and interlaced. "Oh," she said. The bell rang, our old rounded chime. LILA slid off her chair and then back on when I tipped my head. "I'll get it," I said. Arthur stood on the porch with his briefcase in the same deliberate calm he had the day he convinced a judge to give our debate team an extra 30 seconds. He stepped inside and greeted LILA first. "Good evening," he said. "I like your line of spoons." LILA beamed. In the living room, Arthur chose the armchair by the window and set the briefcase on the ottoman. Darren remained standing for a heartbeat and then sat chin up. Camille folded her legs and smoothed her skirt. "Mr. Keene," Darren said, tasting the name. "Is there a problem?" "There was," Arthur said. He unlocked the briefcase with a small private click. "It has been addressed." He pulled out a folder and laid 3 documents on the coffee table in a neat row. "This is a signed and notarized revocation of any existing durable power of attorney naming anyone other than Ms. Quinn. If any such instrument existed, it is no longer operative." Darren's smile tightened. There isn't an operative one, he said. Good, Arthur said. Then we have perfect clarity. He tapped the second document. This is Ms. Quinn's updated will. Its terms aren't relevant to this conversation beyond the fact that it is current and it points to a trust. He touched the third, then left his hand resting on it. This is the Spring Orchard Trust executed this afternoon. A corporate trustee has accepted appointment. No family member nor friend holds discretionary authority. Camille reached out and then withdrew her hand before it met the paper. Is this necessary? She asked. The question was to Arthur, but the voice belonged to the afternoon I'd spent at the credit union. Nora is well within her rights, Arthur said. She has made clear the way her affairs should be handled. She has also confirmed new banking arrangements independent of any third-party access. I'm here because she asked me to be present when she shared that news. It seemed the respectful way. Darren's jaw made a movement I had seen when he was 5, and the rules of a game had not gone his way. We weren't trying to control anything he said. We were trying to help. Then you'll be relieved, I said, because now there's nothing to carry. For a moment, there was only the sound of the heat coming on and the faint click of the brass clock in the hall, the one that has kept time since Martin brought it home from the estate sale, with a story about the man who had owned it and polished it weekly. Camille's breath came in on a small shiver. Arthur closed the briefcase. That's the substance, he said, standing. If you have counsel and want them to review any of this, we can provide copies through their office. We do, Darren said too quickly, and we will. Arthur nodded to Lila, thanked her for the spoons, and let me see him out. On the porch, his voice went quiet enough to sit between us without leaking. Call if anything escalates, he said. I thanked him and watched his taillights ribbon down the street. When I returned, Darren's hands were flat on his knees. Camille had turned the brochure for Willow Birch face down as if paper could mind its manners. We ate the rest of the soup in the quiet people use when they share a room with something new. That night, I slept as if my muscles understood the order of the house. The morning drew its lines across the curtains and let in the outline of the elm. I made coffee. Lila left for school with a lunch of leftover bread and a wedge of cheese wrapped in wax paper, old-fashioned and pleasing. Darren kissed the top of my head and left for the office without speaking about the night before. Camille said she had a haircut and held the front door as if it had grown heavy. At 10, Arthur called. They've retained a firm with a crisp letterhead, he said. They're petitioning for a capacity evaluation. On what grounds, I asked. On the grounds that a medical note is easier to waive than a trust instrument, he said. Don't worry, it's a nuisance with a schedule. He gave me a time and a name. At 2:30, I sat in a room that had the good kind of quiet and smiled at a doctor who wore wool trousers and a narrow watch. I'm Dr. Greer, she said. Her eyes had the patience of someone who has listened professionally to cries, refusals, and hope. We'll take our time. She asked me to remember 3 words. She asked the date, the month, my address, my phone number. She asked who the president was and then who had been president when Martin first taught at the community college. We talked about numbers. I told her my checking balance as of last week and the certificate at First National that had matured the year Martin broke his wrist on the ladder. I named streets between our house and the river and then backwards. She asked me to draw a clock. I drew 11:10 and shaded the hands thicker than they needed to be. She smiled and asked me to define a proverb. I offered 2. Tell me about Lila, she said. She's true, I said, and surprised myself by how quickly that word arrived. She collects smooth stones in a jar and calls it her future museum. She wants a microscope. She likes the word organized. Dr. Greer lowered her pen. All right, she said. Is there anything you want me to note? Yes, I said. Please record that I'm not exhausted, only tidy. She laughed a small, clean sound and stood. You're fine, she said. I'll send the report. On my walk home, the air carried a dry leaf smell. I stopped at the grocer's for apples and a pint of cream and at the post office to send a birthday card to a woman from choir who still remembered the alto line better than anyone. At the mailbox by the park, I met our neighbor with the golden retriever who always offers a paw even if your hands are full. By the time I set the apples in the bowl and washed a knife, the phone rang again. Arthur did not bother with greetings. I went through Martin's files, he said. Some of them were in your box. Some must have drifted when you moved. There was a policy I hadn't seen before. Life insurance, I said. The word felt ordinary going out and then came back with an edge. From the year he turned 60, Arthur said. $1.5 million. Beneficiaries split a colleague named Harriet Lowell and you. Records show Ms. Lowell received $750,000. Your deposit matches only $400. The knife touched the cutting board. $400, I repeated. There are signatures on 2 change forms, he said. One is your name in a hand that isn't yours. The other redirects part of the mailing. The redirect address is a P.O. box that closed 6 months after the funeral. My thumb found the soft point on the apple where it had pressed against another apple. Darren handled the mail, I said. He collected the packets. He took me to sign things at the mortgage office. I thought it was the mortgage office. Arthur didn't fill the space. He let the information settle the way you let batter rest before heat. Can you connect me with Ms. Lowell, I said. I already called her to verify she received her share, he said. She did. She assumed you knew the structure. I'll call her, I said. Harriet answered on the second ring with the voice of someone who has given directions over a museum front desk and meant them to be followed. When I told her my name, she inhaled as if a door had opened unexpectedly. Nora, she said, I admired Martin. I never wanted... This isn't a good way to meet. No, I said, but we've met. I asked her to tell me what she knew. She spoke carefully, each sentence fitted to the next. When she finished, she said, Your son told me you had the full picture. He said you agreed the funds were best handled through him. He told me a lot of things, I said. I'm sorry, she said, and she sounded like it reached past the phone. I should have asked for something with your hand on it. We all should have asked for something, I said. Thank you for speaking with me. After the call, I finished cutting the apple and laid the white crescents on a plate. I ate one and then another. They were not as sweet as they looked. I put the rest under a glass dome because I like the way a dome makes ordinary things behave. At 4, LILA burst in with a drawing of a cat suspended from balloons. He's going to the museum, she announced. The future one. Good, I said. Every museum needs a curator who understands flight. Darren came home later than usual. His tie was loose and a wet tire streak marked his pant leg. He kissed Lila's hair and went straight to the sink to wash his hands. How was your day? He asked, without turning. Full, I said. We ate leftover bread with soft cheese and scattered pepper. Camille claimed a headache and lay on the sofa with a hand over her eyes as if the light had gone greedy. Lila built a fort out of the dining chairs and a sheet and called it a reading tent. Pepper inspected it and approved without reservation. When the house settled and Lila slept, I stood at the kitchen window and looked at my reflection woven into the dark like the pattern in a scarf. The elm lifted its shoulders against the sky. Across the street, a man carried a laundry basket to his car. A woman came out with a hanger and hooked it on his finger, and he laughed and let it stay there while he loaded shirts. Small choreography, ordinary and real. I dried my hands and took the phone from the counter. The numbers lived in my fingers. When the call connected, Darren's voice came wary and bright. Mom, lunch tomorrow, I said. Casa Valdez, noon. There was a pause shaped exactly like uncertainty. Don't be late, I said, and ended the call. Casa Valdez had windows that caught the noon sun and turned water glasses into small lanterns. I chose a booth against the wall. The waitress brought chips and salsa and set them down with the efficient kindness of someone who has delivered news before without meaning to. Darren arrived with his tie already loosened, scanning the room as if he expected a flash. He sat, then stood again to adjust the chair, then sat once more and reached for a chip he didn't eat. Mom, he said, this is dramatic. It's lunch, I said. Order something. He didn't. The waitress came back with a pencil behind one ear. I asked for the chicken mole. Darren asked for water. When she left, he folded his hands on the table, laced them, unlaced them. You sounded firm on the phone, he said lightly. I was at the sink, I said. It's the easiest place to sound firm. He tried a smile. It won and then fell. Look, he said about last night, I overreached. Willow Birch was too fast. We were trying to be efficient. You were rehearsed, I said. That's different. The water arrived. He drank half and set the glass down as if he were concluding something. We can slow down, he said. Just talk to me before you bring Arthur into the living room. I looked at his hands. He has Martin's knuckles narrower than you expect. Arthur was there, so I wouldn't have to raise my voice, I said. I prefer paper when there's paper to be had. He let the quiet sit, then leaned forward until his cuff brushed the salsa. What do you want, Mom? What is owed, I said, and a record that knows it. His gaze skittered for a fraction and then returned with a steadiness he has learned to buy. Owed, he said, testing the word. Owed how? Through a policy you signed for in my name, I said, and the line of it ran clean across the table like a string pulled taut. The one dated the year your father turned 60, $1.5 million split between me and a colleague of his. She received $750,000. I received $400. The missing $350 did not evaporate. Color drained from his face and then returned in 2 spots. Harriet, he said without meaning to. Yes, I said. She has documents for her share. I have documents for mine. The change forms carry a version of my signature that wobbles like someone drawing it from memory. Mom, he said. He reached and then stopped. You were grieving. I was protecting you from mess you didn't need. The mess, I said, is forgery. He flinched at the word, then forced himself to stillness. You don't understand how those months were. The bills were climbing. Camille was underwater with the remodel interest was jumping. The mortgage company is not a beneficiary on my life, I said. He rubbed his forehead, leaving a pale streak above his eyebrow. I was keeping the roof over your head. You were selling the floor from under it, I said. The waitress returned with my plate. Darren moved his glass and made space for the heat to sit between us. I cut a small piece and tasted it so my mouth would know something other than steel. He watched me like he was waiting to be graded. "This can be repaired," he said quickly. "We moved some things around. I talked to First National. We set up a repayment plan. There's no reason to drag my name." "Your name is on the forms," I said. "I am not dragging it." His phone buzzed against the table and then again. He looked down and then away. The second buzz made him pick it up. His mouth worked without sound. He set the phone down and for a moment held it with his palm pressed flat on the screen. "Camille," he said, voice thin. "She says there are officers at the house." I folded my napkin and placed it beside the plate. "There are," I said. Arthur walked the filings into the clerk's office at 8. Insurance fraud, forgery, exploitation of an at-risk adult. A judge signed service this morning. He stared at the water glass as if it might tell him what room he was in. "So that's it," he said, and tried for anger found only scale. "That's the docket," I said. "There will be other rooms." He stood and then sat and then stood. "I need to go home," he said. "I need to what?" I asked. He didn't answer because there wasn't one. I paid the check. He left without touching the tip jar. On my walk back, the wind came up from the river and laughed at my scarf. I held it anyway. At the corner by the florist, I thought of Lila's 2 squeezes the day before the way certainty can be small and exact. At 4:30, the local news carried the story without adjectives. Riverton insurance agent Darren Quinn was taken into custody today on suspicion of insurance fraud, forgery, and exploitation of an at-risk elder. Court records cite a discrepancy of approximately $350,000 from a life insurance policy. They filmed the red brick courthouse with geese in the lawn like a polite backdrop. The anchor's voice was careful. She said his name like she had never met anyone who carried it. Lila called from Camille's sister's apartment where she was staying that night. "Gran," she said, "Aunt Mina says the TV is not our business. Is Daddy in trouble?" "Daddy?" "Your dad made choices that are being checked," I said. "Adults check each other when the numbers don't add up." "Did the museum cat fly yet?" she asked, shifting her weight from foot to foot. I pictured the balloons. I pictured the jar of river stones on my dresser, all smooth as coins all found. "He's on his way," I said. "He has a careful pilot." The weeks that followed ran on rails someone else laid. Arthur translated. Dr. Greer's report arrived on letterhead so crisp it felt like a fresh shirt, no deficits. Oriented to person, place, and time. Financial awareness intact. The prosecutor's office produced copies of the forms with a signature like my name wearing a mask. Bank records walked in 2 lines, deposits and withdrawals, dates and destinations. The P.O. box closed after 6 months like a mouth that had said enough. Camille came to see me once alone. She stood with her tote tucked under her arm and did not come further than the entryway. "I didn't know about the policy," she said. "I knew about the roof. I knew about the remodel. I wanted the kitchen finished and the inspectors off our backs and the photos to look like the photos. I didn't ask where the scaffolding came from. You built a house," I said. "I asked where the studs were, that's all." She nodded. "I'm listing the house next week. Buyers will want the staging. Lila and I will move to a 2-bedroom near the Red Awning Bakery. I asked them for hours. I can make the early shift." She looked at me as if she were borrowing a word. "I can knead." "Tell Lila I like a crust that cracks," I said. I handed her a bag of cookbooks Martin loved, and she held them like someone taking in a neighbor's plant for the winter. When the hearing came, the courthouse smelled the way courthouses smell, like old paper and people who meant to be elsewhere. Darren stood next to a lawyer with polished shoes and answered the judge's questions with a voice that broke on the 3rd syllable of his name. He waived a trial. He admitted to signing documents, to misdirecting mail, to depositing funds into an account only he could see. He did not look for me. I did not look for him. We considered the same flag on the wall instead. The judge spoke in a tone that never lifts or drops. 2 years in a minimum security facility, she said, and restitution in the amount of $350,000, plus statutory interest payable to the Spring Orchard Trust. She set 5 years of probation after his release and something called counseling that lives on a schedule. Camille sat behind me. I knew it was her from the scrape of her breath. When we stood, she didn't reach for me because there were too many people and because some things stay in the air until the room empties. Outside, geese argued about hierarchy the way they do, heads low, wings open. The courthouse light hit the walkway like a blade you could step over if you were watching your feet. I moved from Darren's house into a place with 3 rooms and daylight that behaved itself. The building is old enough to have narrow radiators and a mail slot that thunks at 11. My windows watch a park where the city leaves clover unmown on purpose for a week in June, so bees will feel welcome. The cat came with me chair to chair as if he had always known the map I would choose. Pepper sleeps on the back of the sofa and makes a sound like a match going out when he dreams. I hung only what I loved, a photograph of the riverside cottage taken the summer before we sold it. Martin's brass clock, a pencil drawing LILA did of a plane and a rowboat occupying the same sky. I put the trust binder on a shelf within reach and a jar of smooth stones where the light can touch them. The kitchen table is small and square. It takes a cloth well. On Tuesdays, I walk to the community center with a roll of watercolor paper under my arm. The instructor, a woman who wears a men's watch and an apron stiff with pigment, says, "Let the water do some of the work." I do. I bring home sheets that look like weather and others that look like the inside of fruit. Some weeks I tear them up and use the edges as bookmarks. On Thursdays, I volunteer at the library sorting donations, a task that feels like garden work for the hands. Sometimes I find a note tucked inside a book, a shopping list, a phone number written twice, a recipe for a cake that requires patience and oranges. I slide the notes into a folder because people forget what they want to remember, and sometimes you get to save it for them. Weekends, LILA visits. She likes to swim in the building's square pool that lives under a ceiling of echo. We spread her homework on the table and she narrates while I slice pears. "I'm making a museum of small flying things," she says. We label her stones with pencil on masking tape, Moon River Sidewalk Playground Luck. She keeps the jar on the windowsill until Sunday afternoon when she insists on carrying it down herself, as if it might sprout legs and escape. She asks about her father sometimes. "Where does he sleep? In a room with other men," I say. "Can he read books? Yes, is he mad at you?" "He knows my name," I say, and she seems to take that as the anchor it is. The day Darren was released, the phone rang close to dusk. I recognized the pause before his voice as if it were a weather pattern. "Mom," he said, and nothing came for a second, and then, "It's Darren." "I know," I said. "I don't have lines for this," he said, and coughed as if a small thing had lodged. "I'm at Mina's. I've got a schedule to follow. They told me to ask for structure. We sit down sometime." The radiator clicked like a cricket in a tin. Outside, someone rolled a trash can over the seams in the sidewalk. "I can meet you," I said, "at the bakery on 6th. Early. I like an early table." "I'll be there," he said quickly, and then slower, like it had weight to carry. "Thank you." After the call, I stood for a minute with my hand on the window frame, because wood understands the difference between pressure that harms and pressure that holds. Pepper opened one eye as if to register attendance and then closed it again. I washed 2 glasses and set them mouth down on a clean towel. When they were dry, I put them on the shelf within easy reach. That night, LILA called to say Aunt Mina had bought a second-hand microscope and a box of slides. "There's a fern leaf and a bug wing," she said, delighted. "And a mystery circle." "Bring the mystery," I said. "We'll look at it together." In the morning, I brewed coffee and folded a linen napkin and put it in my bag, next to the jar of stones, because LILA likes to take one with her for luck when she leaves. I checked the clock, wound it once, and listened to the tick smooth out the seam of the hour. When I opened the door, the hallway light made a narrow gold line on the floor that looked like something you could step over and land where you meant to be. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.